What Election Day results mean for Arizona's political landscape.
I would disagree that there was a blue wave.
What change voters want to see before 2020.
Both sides have to want to have that same mindset in order to get something done.
And as a new union takes shape, why they're a rarity in Arizona.
This is an opportunity for us to band together.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. Following Election Day, voters are now making sense of the results. For some, the final tally offered relief and inevitably disappointment for others. As predicted by many, turnout for this election was above average for a midterm. We'll be analyzing the results, but first, a quick recap. One of the earliest races called.
The governor's race in the state of Arizona, where Governor Doug Ducey has defeated David Garcia, professor of education.
Governor Doug Ducey sailed to a second term, breezing past Democratic challenger David Garcia. The narrative dominating national headlines.
The Democrats will control the House of Representatives.
Played out locally in southern Arizona, with Democratic incumbents Tom O'Halloran and Raul Grijalva recapturing the 1st and 3rd congressional districts.
With this majority, it was created by grassroots, it was created by new voters.
And Congressional District 2 swinging back to blue.
The path to taking back the majority ran through District 2, and we did it.
It's not a huge surprise because it's an off year.
Ultimately, it was the state's most closely watched race for U.S. Senate that remained unresolved by the end of the night. For analysis on the results, I'm joined by Dan Shear, editor of the Green Valley News, Jim Ninsel, executive editor of Tucson Local Media, and Sarah Garrett-Gasson, editorial page editor at the Arizona Daily Star. My thanks to all three of you for being here. Let's begin with day after the election, the Senate race in Arizona still too close to call. Jim, you want to start this one?
Yeah, this is a really fascinating race. When you look at where Martha McSally was strongest, it was in the rural counties. Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat, is winning Pima County. She's winning Maricopa County. Normally, that's what you do to win a race in Arizona, and yet Martha McSally has encircled her with these votes in the outlying counties. However, there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 votes left to count. Most of those are in Pima and Maricopa County. There's about 16,000 votes that separate these two as we speak, and I don't want to ruin the magic of television for the viewers out there, but we're taping this on Wednesday and it's airing on Friday. So I would just point out that Kyrsten Sinema is definitely still in this as of this moment.
But we should point out, too, that Maricopa County is a place that really didn't know Martha McSally. She built her career, launched her career in southern Arizona. She went up there, and while she is trailing in Maricopa County right now, she's done really well there, given that she had the name recognition struggle.
But Sarah, this is first female combat pilot. The country knew this woman.
Right. I don't think that she suffers from any sort of lack of name recognition statewide. I mean, I think she's had a national profile. She built that national profile very carefully, a frequent contributor on cable news. I've read articles about her and her accomplishments in women's magazines. She was not an unknown quantity. I think the difference is that she moved to the right vocally, outwardly, embraced President Trump. I think that helped Kyrsten Sinema to some degree to provide a clear-cut option against, if you don't like Trump, even though Kyrsten Sinema has voted with the Trump agenda more often than many Democrats are comfortable with, probably. It was a very clear choice. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see which version of Arizona, which view of Arizona ultimately takes hold.
One of the things we've talked about in our circles, the lack of availability for some of these candidates. Why the sudden change for a lot of these candidates this time around? I mean, people like we said, Leah Marquez Peterson, who we know lost in her district, but we used to see her as a person representing the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and that changed.
I think a lot of them are believing 25-year-old campaign aides who say you can do everything on social media, and I think that's a big problem. I think that they don't understand that there are lots of ways to reach people, and you need to hit all of them, and that the media, on print media in very local areas, is important, and it always will be important. We reach people she wants to reach, and it was very frustrating this campaign season. I've never seen it on both sides. The candidates ducking us is really what it amounted to, and that was really too bad.
I mean, they have it all planned out in their media strategy, and anything that deviates from that or pushes them to get off the messaging and the pat answers is something they don't want anything to do with. Although I will say, in fairness, Leah Marcus Peterson came and spoke with us at the editorial board. The only candidate who didn't come was that we had invited was Martha McSally, and so that kind of speaks for itself.
But we did speak to Martha McSally, and we couldn't get Kirsten Sinema to talk to us. So again, it was, and I will tell you this, that they told us that every 15 minutes of their day is scheduled. I get it, you're busy. But when you talk to me, when you talk to Sarah, you're talking to thousands and thousands of people. Give us some time.
I think a lot of it has to do with the diminishing influence of the media in these elections, however. I think the television ads, the amount of money they're raising for television ads, what was there, $40 million spent in the Senate race, even by outside groups, and that's not even counting what the candidates spent, is drowning out the media. And the way a media story gets attention at this point is it's amplified somehow by campaign ads. So I think there's definitely, the media is not what it used to be.
Let's talk about this blue wave. Is that what happened in the 2nd Congressional District with the election of Ann Kirkpatrick?
I absolutely think so. I think Leah Marcus Peterson was going up against serious headwinds in this race because of the fact that Trump is unpopular in the suburbs, as we saw across the country, and women in particular, I think, were a big factor in this election, and they were not happy with Donald Trump. I mean, this is one of the most competitive districts in the country. It's split 1/3 Democrat, 1/3 Independent, 1/3 Republican. It has been very close in many elections. Martha McSally had a blowout 2 years ago. But other than that, this has been a tight district, and yet Leah Marcus Peterson lost it by 10 points, which we all saw coming.
I would disagree that there was a blue wave. If there was, we would be saying that Kirsten Sinema is our new senator today, and we're not saying that. We don't know yet. So this seat has gone back and forth, and so we'll see what the future brings, but I'm not seeing a wave. I'm not really even seeing a ripple, I don't think.
I was surprised at how closed off Leah Marcus Peterson was in interviews, because we've known her for a very long time. And so seeing how a campaign manages someone who's well-known, has good community experience, and kind of just shut all that down and tried to package her as something kind of different, which we saw in the forums when she answered about the climate change question, when she dodged that. I think that is something that is a lesson for future candidates, that don't get managed out of being yourself.
1st Congressional District, 3rd Congressional District, can anyone ever unseat Tom O'Halloran and Raul Grijalva?
Raul Grijalva probably not. He's probably going to be in there until he wants to go. And the real question on him would be, are we going to let him choose his successor, in essence? But I think that the Republicans have thrown quite a few people at him. The only one who came remotely close was during the Tea Party movement of 2010, Ruth McClung, and she came real close. And other than that, no scares really for this guy. He knows he's in.
On O'Halloran, yes, that's a very competitive district as well, but the Republicans have thrown terrible candidates with Paul Babiou 2 years ago with the scandals that haunted him, and then with Wendy Rogers, who alienated a lot of Republicans in her primary race, and then just ran a campaign of hysteria, honestly, and the crazy things she was saying throughout this campaign were just not going to win over independent voters.
Let's move on to the governor's race. The polling told us that Governor Doug Ducey was going to keep his spot. David Garcia have the firepower he needed to actually give him a competitive race?
David Garcia is a good candidate on the education issue. He ran for state school superintendent a few years ago. Very interesting interview. I learned a lot, and it's his passion, but I think he came off as a one-issue candidate. Plus, the fact is he was running in Arizona, and for a Democrat to be successful on that level in Arizona is very difficult, particularly for governor.
It's fascinating to see the contrast between Kirsten Sinema, who played to the center, and David Garcia, who played to the left in this race, especially since Kyrsten Sinema's background was on the left and David Garcia's background was in the center. So they kind of crossed paths in a way. And, crossing streams is always troublesome, as we learned in Ghostbusters. But I would go so far as to say David Garcia, it's not an exact matchup because of the funding was nowhere near equal between the two campaigns. But you hear this argument all the time in Arizona from people on the left that if candidates just really took more progressive stances and inspired the left to come out and vote for them, then the Democrats would be more successful. And as we saw in this election, it's quite the opposite.
Does that make Donald Trump the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man?
No, something along those lines, yeah.
Wow, that's a great time for a pause. Let's break on this discussion for just a bit, and later in the show, when we return, we'll talk propositions. Leading up to Election Day, our coverage included speaking to voters about the issues that matter most to them. You'll remember we heard from voters in Arizona's 2nd Congressional District, along with students at the University of Arizona. A day after the election, we caught up with Democrat Gary Jones and Republican John Dalton to get their thoughts. Christopher Conover picks up the discussion. And we have results to report tonight. The governor's race.
Were either of you surprised by the outcomes last night?
This one's still incredibly close.
Well, nationally and locally, I would say not necessarily. Obviously, as coming from the Republican perspective,
and they just called the race for you.
We would have obviously wished to have held onto the House of Representatives, but looking at election trends, in years past, this is not something that's unusual.
And I would concur. I wasn't necessarily surprised by anything, except the buildup on the false rhetoric of the immigration caravan. That was a surprise to me that appeared to take some traction and was believed by a number of people.
What do you think the issues that were driving this election were? And did the candidates speak to them enough to get voters out, or did the candidates speak to just what they wanted to speak to?
Well, I think that the election was largely a referendum on Trump. And no matter what the candidates said, some of them stayed away from that issue. For example, Kyrsten Sinema stayed away from that issue largely because she was focusing not only on Democrats, but trying to bring independents in under the blue tent. But many candidates shied away from taking Trump on in some places. On a national basis, some took it on full on, like Beto and Andrew Gillum and others, and lost. So I think the outcome of that on that issue is mixed.
I don't necessarily think it was a referendum against the president. I don't think looking at the House would be a really good synopsis of that. Looking at the Senate, though, we did make gains in the Senate. And that is really what President Trump was focused on, was either maintaining or gaining in the Senate. And that's what he did.
Question directly for you, John, because you're here on the campus of the University of Arizona. We heard a lot about the youth vote. So the morning after, are you happy with the turnout of the youth vote, or once again, it just could have been better?
I think I'm satisfied with the turnout of the youth vote, and I've seen a lot of people on campus going out to vote, especially with the voting station that we have here at the Student Union. And overall, whether it was Democrat or Republicans that they came out to vote for, we saw a lot of engagement. And from the Republican side at the party headquarters, well, the party headquarters for our party, last night we had a lot of college Republicans as well as people that we never knew were involved in, or interested in politics on campus that showed up. So it shows that there's a lot of interest and engagement going on.
We've got some very deep divides coming out of this election. Do you have any level of confidence that those divides can heal, or are we just going to keep them going and run right into 2020?
That depends. It depends largely on the tone that the commander-in-chief and the president set. If he reaches his hand across the aisle to work with the congressional leadership, I think it'll be reciprocated. That said, there's a big wild card out there, and that's the Mueller investigations and all the related, but not necessarily under his control.
I absolutely think it's possible, but again, it comes down to the members of Congress, and again, too, the president has to reach across the aisle to be able to do that. I think he will. He realizes the situation he's in with a divided Congress. And again, when it comes to bipartisanship, both sides have to want to have that same mindset in order to get something done. And I believe that that's possible. I believe it's able to be accomplished, but time will tell. And 2020 will be the true referendum on whether President Trump's been successful or not.
Let me ask you both to switch roles, if you will. Gary, I want you to think like a Republican for a minute. John, I'd like you to think like a Democrat for a minute. Where would you like to see the opposite party, if you will, go leading into 2020 and beyond?
Well, I'd like to see the Republican Party of my parents and my grandparents. I was the first member of my family to register as a Democrat. I'd like to see the Republican Party go back to its roots as a party of fiscal responsibility, because it's abandoned that plank. I'd like to see it go back to being a party that was promoter of free trade instead of anti-free trade. I'd like to see the Republican Party hold itself accountable. I think our best hope for that is Mitt Romney in the Senate. I think he can fill the shoes that John McCain left so big and vacant and empty by standing up as a voice to counter the worst instincts of our current president.
I think that it'd be great to see the Democratic Party shift more towards a role of when John F. Kennedy was president, traditional, or what would you call it, traditional liberalism, I guess you could call it, and kind of focusing on kind of, economic issues and working with Republicans on a lot of things.
All right, John Dalton, Gary Jones, thanks so much for sitting down with us the day after the election.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Nurses at St. Mary's and St. Joseph's hospitals in Tucson voted overwhelmingly to unionize. It affects about 700 nurses. Vanessa Barchfield reports on how that decision came about and what that means in a state with historically low union membership.
Fawn Slade is a nurse on the orthopedic floor at St. Joe's. She says the efforts to organize started in September when some union reps came to talk with her and her colleagues at the two Tucson hospitals.
And so we met with union organizers, had a couple meetings, felt that this could be a positive change for us here at St. Joseph's, and moved forward from there.
Close to 75% of the nurses at both St. Joe's and St. Mary's voted to join the National Nurses Organizing Committee, National Nurses United. Slade says for her, the decision was an easy one.
Because it allows nurses to have their voices heard, to bargain together with leadership to be sure that our patients are advocated for effectively.
One of the issues in the nursing unions is patient care, and that gets to patient ratios, how many patients per nurse. And so as a collective bargaining agreement, you can raise that number so there are more nurses per patient. And that usually translates into better patient care.
Arizona has one of the lowest union memberships in the country. Has that always been the case, and what are some reasons for that?
Part of it is just the industries that are here. You have mining, which is a unionized workforce oftentimes, and then you have some of the resorts and entertainment in that area that are often unionized in terms of the workers there. But when we think of unions in this country, we think of the car manufacturers and big industry. And Arizona just doesn't have a lot of big industry, and I think so as a result, unions haven't been here as strongly as in some other states.
Arizona is also a right-to-work state.
So right-to-work state, what that means is that the employer cannot force or enter into an agreement with a union to say we'll only hire union workers. And similarly, unions can't force all of the employees to pay union dues. And that's what right to work means. And that's set out in the Arizona Constitution.
Slade says that raised some questions.
That was a pretty big concern of how does a union work in a right to work state?
With this union going into place in both St. Joe's and St. Mary's, the employees will have to voluntarily decide whether or not they're going to pay the union dues, even though they're always going to get the benefits of the union contract.
There are 27 right-to-work states across the country.
In those states, we have found that worker benefits have been lower, workers' health have been lower. In fact, in those states, you are 47% more likely, if you're under the age of 65, to not have health insurance. And so, again, this is an opportunity for us to band together and to look at our patients and as well as our community and say this is a positive change. This is a change that will positively influence not only the staff members here at our facility, but our community as a whole.
The union vote at these two hospitals passed pretty easily. What are some arguments against unionizing?
With a union, it's much harder for people to be let go or disciplined because everything is based on what is in the collective bargaining agreement, which is just, it's called a CBA, and that's a contract. And so one thing is it's hard to get rid of people who aren't doing as good of a job because you have to follow all the procedures to find cause for termination, as opposed to in Arizona, as you may recall, we're an at-will state and employees can be terminated with or without cause. There's also the issue of people who are really good employees maybe aren't going to get as big of pay raises as they would in a more competitive workforce, because usually pay raises in that are set and standardized based on seniority.
And do you expect that other nurses at other hospitals in Tucson might decide to organize after seeing the example at St. Joe's and St. Mary's?
I think certainly once a union comes into an industry within a location, such as in Tucson here, they start talking and they start saying what's going on there, what are your things, what are your wages, what are your hours. The success of that union, if they're successful at St. Joe's and St. Mary's, I think you'll see the attempt to spread other places. If they have problems and they're not successful, obviously then that'll answer what happens with the other hospitals.
I certainly think we've set a precedent that this can be successful and that it can be successful here in Tucson, Arizona.
Nurses at St. Mary's and St. Joseph's will now elect leadership, then start contract negotiations with hospital administration. In a statement, the hospital's parent company, Tenet Healthcare, said it respects their decision to unionize and it will work to reach a collective bargaining agreement that benefits both groups. And returning now to our Journalist Roundtable, let's begin with how voters decided on some closely watched propositions. Did anyone expect to see the voucher expansion crash the way that it did?
I did expect it to go down, but not quite like this. And I think what people were saying is, you know, you do have vouchers already. Do we really need to expand them? I think a lot of people looked at perhaps the realistic effect on public schools that vouchers could have and said, yeah, I think we just don't want to do that. You have enough already.
But I'd heard the polling was not very good for this particular proposition. That oddly enough, a lot of Republican voters did not like it, but Hispanic voters, Hispanic Democrats kind of did like it, but in this case it was something that I think clearly from the results was not popular on the right or the left.
Voters also approved Prop 126, banning new or increased taxes on services. And in Pima County, they rejected Prop 463, a bond measure that would have gone to road repairs.
On the roads, I'm always fascinated that the people who bellyache the most about potholes seem to have no interest in actually paying to fix them. I mean, we're not going to magically fill potholes with no money. If you don't have money, you don't get asphalt.
I didn't see a tremendous pushback campaign on 463, the county bonds. You know, you'd see signs here and there, and certainly people were talking about it, but I was surprised at how lopsided that turned out to be with the no vote.
This is the same thing 3 years ago when we had that $815 million bond request from Pima County. The last few weeks, I had this sense that, wait a minute, I don't think people are real excited about this. We held a forum in Green Valley, and that came out, and I thought this thing could go down, and it did. Same thing happened this time. I was starting to get this vibe over the last couple of weeks of people saying, you know what, this is not the best way to fund road maintenance.
Voters also overwhelmingly rejected Prop 127, which would have forced energy companies to get half of their power from renewable sources by 2030.
Too much of a California influence, because we heard some of that in the messaging on this one.
Oh, for sure. And I think it was, again, the campaign saying your utility bills are going to go up. That was the thing there. It's just like another tax, essentially. And so it just wasn't sold in a way that folks were willing to say, hey, yeah, I think it's a great idea to reduce greenhouse gases and increase the use of solar and renewable energy.
Prop 127, part of the issue, I think, for some voters was they agree with the goal, they agree with the aim of it, but putting it in the state constitution was just perhaps a bridge too far. I think that was something that made people go, there has to be a better way.
Are Arizona Democrats still as hopeful as they were a week ago, given what's just taken place in Arizona?
I think the Democrats down in our area, and they're very strong, very active in Green Valley and Sahuarita, are hopeful, but they don't pin that hope on necessarily winning elections. They pin it on getting active, writing letters to the editor, becoming involved in groups that actually set goals and get things done, again, on a very local level. And so I think a lot of them have figured out that maybe the national level is maybe a lost cause at this point, particularly because of President Trump. And so they're trying to change their corner of the world rather than the entire world. And I think that's not a bad strategy.
We'll see what Donald Trump does over the next 2 years, but he has clearly galvanized Democrats in a way that nobody else has. So if he continues down the road he's been on, I suspect you'll see Democrat energy continuing despite what may have been frustrations in this week's election.
But Sarah, we heard that in the days following the presidential election, and we thought that was what would happen with this midterm.
Right.
Going to take a little bit more time, perhaps?
I think so. I think part of the issue is the high hopes. I think Democrats, maybe they're just naturally optimistic. I don't know. And I think that if people take this as, well, I didn't get everything we wanted, so it's a loss and a defeat, and now I'm going to just go home and sit on my couch and complain on Facebook, then we won't have any energy. I think that they need to galvanize the younger members, the people who ran and lost, but are new, exciting candidates. I think that needs to be the energy, and they really have to work at it and not take it for granted like Democrats so often do.
Okay. All right. My thanks to all three of you.
Thank you.
Before we go, a look ahead at next week. Arizona 360 has a closer look at the recent surge of immigrants seeking asylum in the U.S. From an area where larger groups are crossing,
passengers that perhaps are being brought here by smugglers on a bus to cross into the United States illegally.
And the detention center in Ajo, the next stop for apprehended immigrants.
Our eventual goal is to get them out of our custody within 72 hours.
And we also explore what happens after.
They love this country. They're coming here with hope. They want to work. They want to help. They want to contribute.
And where families can end up as they navigate the legal system.
Are they going to be released on an ankle monitor, or are they going to be sent to a family residential center?
Next time on Arizona 360. That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. Get in touch with us and let us know what you think on social media. We'll see you next week.